Good evening, America. I'm Marisa.
And I'm Kristen.
And welcome to The Timeline.
On tonight's episode, we'll be discussing the Roaring Twenties.
During the decade before the 1920s, America underwent tumultuous occurrences, most notably World War I. The years following this drastic event caused feelings of uneasiness and a desperate need for change. Shortly after the beginning of the decade, advances in technology became great in number, introducing the radio and mass production of the automobile. Women finally gained a voice in politics by earning full voting rights after the years of struggle. Jazz quickly became the sound of the era. This time period was filled with crime and wrongdoing due to the illegal activities of American gangsters. Large movements regarding thinking and philosophy erupted during the 1920s, including realism and the Harlem Renaissance, introducing many individuals who would later go on to change the literary world. Changes were made in regards to the moral atmosphere of the times through the charges behind the Scopes monkey trial and the desire for wealth and status. Many of these themes were brought to light in the novel The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald. The 1920s ended with a bang due to the crash of the stock market and the loss of the American dream.
Now let's take a more in-depth look on how the 1920s greatly influenced what America is today.
Let's first start with how the 20s has altered American history.
The automobile was one of the most important aspects of the 1920s. Although it was invented in 1886, its popularity grew immensely during the 1920s due to Henry Ford's invention of the combustion engine. The combustion engine allowed for the price of automobiles to drastically decrease, increasing its popularity. The automobile allowed for greater transportation, allowing for people to travel farther distances, and also making life a lot more fun. Increasing demand for the automobile caused for a very positive effect on the economy. It increased the labor force because so many new cars need to be produced because of the high demand. Also, because cars need to travel longer distances, there is a need for gas, which caused for gas attendants at gas stations, and also because a lot of the roads back then were dirt roads, so it didn't do so well with the tires of the car, therefore paved roads needs to be created. The automobile has undergone a huge transformation over the past 70 years into what it looks like today. And who knows, maybe in 2020, our cars will even be flying. But for now, we're just gonna have to deal with what we have today. Four-wheel drive, XM radio. Speaking of the radio, Marisa?
Another important aspect of the 1920s was the radio. Although it was first invented in 1879, it was very inconvenient to the user. By the 1920s, radio signals were transmitted with the clarity that we know today. Public radio stations quickly took hold in America, with the first one created in 1922. The radio represented a clear and convenient way of conveying information and ideas. Although it primarily started out with news, it quickly led to concerts and sermons. The radio is also an influential aspect of the Jazz Age, the beat of the 1920s. This musical period was the root of much of the music we hear today.
One of the most powerful impacts the 1920s had on America today was the institution of women's suffrage.
That is right, and in the year 1920, the 19th Amendment was passed for women's suffrage.
The 19th Amendment allowed women to vote and have their voice in political decisions in America.
Before this amendment, women were not equal to men.
That's correct, and actually, it was only up until a short period before the 19th Amendment was passed that women finally started to gain some respect in society. During World War I, women had a much larger role than they had in previous wars past. Also, women were now able to own property. And it all came full circle in 1920 with the institution of the 19th Amendment, which gave women the right to vote and have a say in political issues.
Because of the advances that women made during the 1920s, society now accepts women's opinions and ideas as equal to those of men. Girl power! New Welch's Concord Grape, made with real fruit juice and 100% vitamin C. Welch's.
Welcome back, folks. The 1920s are known as a time of prosperity, but underneath all the glitz and glam lies the illegal activities
of American gangsters.
American gangsters during the 1920s controlled liquor sales, gambling, and prostitution.
Al Capone was one of the most feared gangsters at this time. He was involved in prohibition and predetermined crimes.
Though they were viewed as murderers, American gangsters were involved with the political, social, and economic conditions of this time.
Gangsters of the 20s set the standards for gangs today and their involvement in illegal activities.
Of these gangs remained, for the most part, behind closed doors. As the decade came to a close, an event occurred that changed America's outlook on the 1920s.
On October 24th, 1929, the Great Crash occurred, the most devastating stock market crash in America's economic history. The Roaring Twenties was a time of wealth and excess, and many believed the market could sustain high price levels.
This catastrophic event still remains a haunting memory, affecting America's opinion on the economy, especially during these tough economic times.
And now a word from our sponsors. Stay tuned.